Okay, let's go live on the Facebook with the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues episode number 25 with Jeff Westfall. This one I'm really looking forward to. Let's see. Guys, do the normal Dave Schrank, Danilo Salvador. Okay, so Jeff, it says you're watching, but you should have received an invitation. So hopefully Blaze Lung, hi Blaze, Zoran is here. So okay, so we'll see what we'll see how the technology treats us this evening, guys. You know, usually 1, 2, or 3 takes. Jeff is here, but it didn't say that, it didn't allow me to bring him on camera. So I might have to push some more buttons or something, and or shut down, restart, do it again. But I promise you, this one is worth waiting for, right? This one's definitely worth going through all the technological mishaps. So Ruben Griffith, how are you? Ruben, you and I we really got to talk. I love your comment on my recent post. And Fabiano Chiapponi, Jeff, you need to find the invitation that was sent. Hey, Randy, that was sent to you and accept it, and then it will tell me that you want to be in my video, and then I click a button and we go from there. That's what you got to do. But sometimes it takes a few attempts before the connections go. So guys, if stay where you are. If I have to shut this down and restart it, and then we'll go from there. But let's just see. Yep. All right, Jeff, if in 10 seconds there's, hey, Double L, if in 10 seconds there's nothing happening, I'll shut it down and restart, and then everybody don't get pissed, just come back on and take part in the show. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, all right, I'm gonna shut it down and start over, and hopefully it'll connect better. Thanks, guys. Okay. Take number 3. Lucky take number 3. Boop. Hey, Magnus Whitehead, what's happening? I was just talking. Okay. Wait, hang on. Jeff is here this time. What it is with Facebook and 3 takes to bring people on. Anyhow, Magnus, as I was saying, I just spoke to Angela Ballantyne, and I think you marked yourself safe down in Barbados too. So I'm glad to hear. Glad to know you guys have internet reception down there, assuming that you are in Barbados. All right, so we should be adding Mr. Westfall this time around. And with it over the next 45, 60 minutes or so, you guys will see why I'm fanboying over him. Okay, add in. Just be patient, everybody. As a matter of fact, okay, but now you got to rotate yourself. Nope, that didn't work. That worked.
Okay.
There we go.
How about this way?
Yeah, yeah. Because our conversation is going to turn the martial art world upside down now.
Well, I'll get confused looking at you that way.
Okay.
How you doing, Dwight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm sorry for all the technological snafus.
Hey, not to worry. I've been telling everybody that you are definitely worth it.
Well, I have actually been following that on my desktop, but I've been trying to get it on the cell phone.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to go when you are.
Yeah, for right now, it seems that iPhone to iPhone works, iPhone to iPad works, but iPhone to laptop, not yet. Right? So
I get it.
okay, so guys, as you are logging in, be kind enough to say where you're logging in from, hit the like button, and feel free to continue hitting the like button throughout the dialogue, and then Facebook will assign its algorithmic relevance to what we do here. All right, so everybody, welcome to episode 25 of the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues with Jeff Westfall. So Jeff and I share a common origin story, right? And you'll hear about that in just a second. And one thing that I hope to achieve in today's dialogue is to kind of illustrate for you what I call the incredible juxtaposition of similarity and difference in the Jeet Kune Do world, right? So, but as my student Glenn will tell you, not all my experiments are successful. But anyhow, so with that said, Mr. Westfall, so let's pretend that we are at a family reunion, right? And we're telling stories. So you tell your story of July 1984, when Dan Inosanto said something like, okay, I'm gonna let you guys do some Muay Thai. He called me up and he called you up. Go, give me your version of it.
Well, it was the California Martial Arts Academy seminars, which were unusual seminars in the first place because they were 40 hours long, 5 8-hour days instead of just over a weekend. And I had already been to the week before with Guru Inosanto. And this week, while I'm assuming that you were attending Guru Inosanto, I was attending the Bill Wallace Superfoot seminar.
Right.
And one of the things they did at the California Martial Arts Academy seminars was on Thursday, they would flip you from one instructor to another because they had 3 of them going on simultaneously.
Yep.
But they had kind of a special assembly where they brought all 3 seminars that were going on concurrently, all 3 groups into a gymnasium. And Sifu Inosanto comes out with a pair of Thai pads, which I had never seen before.
Okay.
And says, I need 2 volunteers from among all you martial artists to come up and hit these Thai pads. And my friends at the Bill Wallace seminar shoved me forward. He had already picked me to be his dummy and his assistant for the seminar. So they naturally picked me and shoved me out there. And I saw you being shoved out there. I'd never met you at that point. And it was Larry Hartzell and Cass Magda who held for us.
Right.
And it was, I think Cass held for me and Larry held for you. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. And as I recall, Sifu Inosanto just said, just keep round kicking these pads, over and over again for 3 minutes, or until you drop dead. And I said, yes, sir. And I started and I heard you kicking. And I remember now I spent a lot of time kicking shields at my academy. But it was different. And plus we were up in front of a bunch of people. And I remember thinking, man, I'm going to get tired really fast. And right after I thought that, Sifu Inosanto said, 38 seconds have passed. And then I realized, okay, this is really going to be rough. And I just kept pacing myself and kicking and kicking and kicking. And then finally he said, you're done, time. And I was still on my feet. And that's what I remember from. Is that what you remember?
Well, yeah. So I remember trying to stay on my feet because I wanted to be cool.
Right.
But it didn't work. Right. It didn't work. I just collapsed on the ground.
I do seem to recall looking over my shoulder and seeing you on the ground. Yeah.
Yes.
I do recall looking over my shoulder and seeing you down on one knee or sitting on the ground or something. I barely made it myself. I mean, I can't brag.
Yeah.
But then Sifu Inosanto, he walks over and he puts his arm around me, he pulls me aside, and he says, how many fights have you had? And I had never fought in the ring, but my training partner had had over 100 boxing fights, and we fought and sparred all the time. And I said, I've never had one. And he goes, wow, you really need to go find Master Chai. And that was my inroad to go seek out Master Chai.
So okay, so now did you come back to St. Louis in '85 when he brought Ajahn Chai?
I did not. I met Ajahn Chai in 1986 at the Smoky Mountain Camp.
Okay, yeah, because I was back in '85, and that's where I met Ajahn Chai. Now you said you had spent the previous week training with Sifu Inasano, so he knew you from that week before. Okay, and
right, well, I wouldn't go so far as to say he knew me. I mean, I was there. I don't know how much of an impression I made.
Now, and was that your first CMAA, or were you in Irvine in '83?
No, that was my first CMAA. My first time meeting Sifu Dan, and my first CMAA. It just happens that it's very close to my hometown. It's only 3 hours from my hometown.
Right. And had you trained with Bill Wallace prior to that, or was that your first time with him also?
No. Yes.
Okay. Because I mean, I remember you as being a tall, skinny guy who could kick really well. That's what I remember.
That was my obsession in those days. I was obsessed with flexibility and kicking, for sure.
Okay. Can you? Yeah. All right. That took a long time. I don't know if, can you hear me now, Jeff? Okay, yes, but it's taken a while to get to you. All right, so we'll keep this going. When I was on your website, I've been on your website for a while now, and when you say tri-state and you're in Indiana, that refers to Indiana, Illinois, and Kentucky, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Now, is there a lot of interstate commuting for like work and entertainment in that tri-state area?
Absolutely. My hometown, Evansville, it's not a huge town compared to Miami. It's got about 140,000 people, and it's the only town of any size, the only city of any size within 2 hours in any direction. So people from Southern Illinois, Western Kentucky definitely do a lot of traveling to my hometown to work and for cultural purposes as well. A significant number of my students are from Illinois and Kentucky.
Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because in your bio on the website, it says that you started with Kyokushin and Tai Lung, Kung Fu, and boxing, correct? Right?
Yes.
Yeah, this is taking too long, guys. I think I'm gonna cut this and go off camera with Jeff.
Okay.
Because he's not hearing me. Yeah. Okay. So, guys, sorry about this, but we'll I'll send Jeff the link, and then he and I will go off camera. I promise you, it'll be a great dialogue, and then I'll put it up for you later this evening or tomorrow. All right. So, Jeff, look for a Facebook message with a new link from me. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. All right, guys, thanks for spending some time with us, and I promise you a great dialogue later on this evening or tomorrow. Take care. All right. I was just jamming while you were getting ready.
Always a good way to pass the time.
All right. Is this better?
Yeah. Sounds like we're getting much better quick time response.
Yeah. The iPhone to iPhone thing, unfortunately, that's all Facebook lets you do right now. I don't know why, but this works much better. It's just that people can't, all your fans can't be live with us.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been hit in the face so many times, it might be a bit frightening for them to deal with.
Yeah, whatever. All right. So let's see. I think I'll take what we did on Facebook and I'll splice it together with this stuff, and
Okay.
And we'll go from there. So let's pick this up at you've been in martial arts since 1971.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, is that your hand that's up?
Yeah, I'm holding my iPhone.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Is that
All
better?
right. Yeah. All right. Okay. So since 1971 with Kyokushin, Tai Lung, and boxing. So the first thing I have to ask you about Kyokushin, was Katsuaki Sato a hero of yours?
Yes. Very much so. He eventually went off and started his own system. But when I was in Kyokushin, he was still heavily involved in Kyokushin.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was my guy down in Barbados. No, we had a very small Kyokushin section down there, but I read about him in like Black Belt magazine and what have you, and that's where I fell in love with him.
Sure, me too.
Okay. But now Tai Lung, I could not find a reference other than Kung Fu. I see you shaking your head. Other than Kung Fu Panda. Seriously.
I had not heard that reference before.
Okay, that's all there is. I couldn't find anything about Tai Lung Kung Fu, so break that one down for me.
Sure. There was a gentleman in my hometown named Chi Kyung Lee, who he formulated Tai Lung Kung Fu himself.
Okay.
And he combined elements of Wing Chun and Choi Li Foot and Hung Gar.
Got it.
And so basically it was his system.
Okay. All right. Well, that explains it then. Because, I got down to page 7 on Google search. That
doesn't surprise me. he passed away, I heard, just a couple of years ago. I haven't seen him in decades.
Okay. So that's 71. You're what, 14 years old at the time, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the boxing, was that on your own or was that in a gym?
It was never at a gym. It was, basically as I would run into guys, it started with students, people who started training with me. They wanted to learn to kick and they knew how to box. And I would go, well, show me what you know too.
Yeah.
And then eventually, and I think this gentleman is actually, has logged on and is watching today. The guy who taught me 99% of what I know how to box is now named Kevin Young. In those days, he was Kevin Merritt. He started as a student of mine, but he had a ridiculous number of fights, both as a pro, an amateur and a pro. He fought for the 82nd Airborne Division's team, and taught me a ton about boxing. And most of that was done just sparring with each other. I taught him how to kick, and he taught me how to box. Now,
your kicking knowledge and skill came out of Kyokushin, or you did that on your own, or what?
A little bit of everything. The kicking techniques in Kyokushin, as you probably know, were not more full hip Korean style of kicking.
Right.
And in my hometown, all the training partners that I could find, because my Kyokushin teacher was in Memphis, and I could only go see him once a month.
Okay.
And that relationship eventually, fizzled out because it was just too difficult to go see him.
Yeah.
And as I started going into the Tai Lung, all the training partners I could find were Taekwondo guys. And there was a Taekwondo school in my hometown that was not like your modern, mall Taekwondo cliche type of situation. These guys could scrap. They were good fighters. They had good, strong basics. And I really admired some of the ways that they kicked. And I just imitated things that they showed me. Then I became obsessed with Bill Wallace. After watching him, fight on television a few times, I would wait till the camera would swing around behind him and I would look how his leg would throw a hook kick.
Yeah.
I said, wait a minute, he's throwing a side kick and then he's missing with it and hooking back. And I just, I did a lot of training on my own. And then when I finally met him, he goes, "Oh, that's pretty good. You're doing this wrong. You're doing that wrong.
Yeah.
You need to fix this up." But he helped me a lot. But I had a lot of it down halfway well just from watching him. But I was a Nidan in Kyokushin, and I was an instructor in Tai Lung, and I was always trying to find more information. In those days there was no internet. You bought O'Hara Publications books.
Oh, okay.
If you wanted information.
Since you mentioned O'Hara Publications, oh man, shoot, I don't know where they are. Did you have Chong Lee's series?
I was just going to say, Dynamic Kicks and Advanced Explosive Kicks were my Bibles. Yeah.
My man.
Me and you, right? I thought Dynamic Kicks was a really, really well done book.
Was
it?
Yeah,
the way he explained, he showed first of all, the illustrations were all from a certain angle, which was good.
Uh-huh.
He explained the angle of the hip really well, how you line up to get power. It was brilliant.
Yes. And then I also have Bill Wallace's
Dynamic Stretching and Kicking.
Stretching, right?
I've got an autographed copy of that.
Okay. Let's see. What about James Liu's Stretching and Kicking?
Very good book. Yeah, absolutely. I've got a copy at my academy. Yes.
You're such a nerd.
I am indeed. You got me pegged. Takes one to know one.
Because we when on the Facebook portion you were talking about the Thursday switch over. In '83, my first week, I got switched over to Bill Wallace's thing.
Right.
And I remember him putting us up against the wall and making you stretch and put your knee back behind your head.
Yep.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So let's see. So what was the driving force? I mean, because I read your bio. I listened to. Oh, I got to ask you this. I'm going to jump all over the place.
That's fine. I like jumping all over the place. Tangents are my thing.
Podcast episode number 1. Well, first of all, let me calm myself because I'm such a fan of yours.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
I'm such a fan of yours. Why martial brain? Because I think it could have been also called martial body or martial human. So how come martial brain?
I am really fascinated by brain science. Mm-hmm. And the things we're starting to learn about human behavior based on the peculiar way that our brains have evolved through the millennia, through the centuries. And it's the intersection between this fascinating world of martial arts and this quirky way that the human brain goes through the process of learning the martial arts or of not learning the martial arts. Okay. So it's the weird behavior of martial artists cross-referenced with little forays into science and history and linguistics and all the stuff that fascinates me. So, and I very specifically did not choose the martial mind because I wanted to get away from mind-body duality, which I think is not a thing. I think that's a fallacy. Your mind is what your brain does. And so I really wanted to emphasize the brain. Some people have accused me of saying, "Oh, you're calling yourself a brain." That's not it at all. Mm-hmm. I'm referring specifically to the human brain, how quirky it is, how fallible it is, how potentially amazing it is at the same time as it does martial arts.
Okay. So
I even in one episode of my podcast recently, I used the analogy of your body. The recent episode was called "Enjoy Yourself," because yourself is your most important possession, and both that includes your mind and your body. And I said your body is the spaceship that your brain navigates the universe in, and that's the way I look at it. It's all connected. You can't do one without the other.
Yeah. Okay. Now, episode number 1. How long will it take? How and why did that end up being? Why was that episode number 1?
That's interesting. It's the single most common phone call question that I get running an academy.
Okay.
Is, how long do I have to train? I don't want to pay you money forever. So how long do I have to train? And it's my crude attempt to try to answer that question in a realistic, honest way.
No. I'm going to pick a fight with you. It's not crude at all. It is not crude. Here's what you say. If you apply yourself, I wrote this down, man. It is not crude. It's brilliant. If you
Thank you.
apply yourself, I think that after a few months, you'll be very happy with your progress, but not yet satisfied enough, and you'll probably want to continue.
That's the way I think a good teacher is doing his job if that's the way he feels.
But that's brilliant marketing.
Yeah, I think honesty is much better marketing than lying to people, right?
But it's brilliant. I'm stealing that.
Feel free. It's awesome.
Right? So then the other thing about the podcast, where did you learn to develop your podcast voice?
I don't know. I've always been told I have a voice for radio ever since I was young. You know, I've been told that you should be a radio announcer. So I always had that.
I agree. Wow. Okay. Now the reason why I talked about the martial body is because, again, on your on the website, let me find the section on that. It says he maintains a rigorous personal training regimen for skill enhancement, cardiovascular fitness, strength development, flexibility, and longevity. So that's why I thought, okay, he could call this the martial body, but that would probably be too limiting, right?
I think so, because the brain and the body are interconnected anyway. But yeah, I definitely go into a lot of exercise science stuff and a lot of things where you really can't separate the brain from the body.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us specifically, what do you do for those? Just one thing that you do for each of those attributes. So training regimen for skill enhancement.
Okay. Well, that's you would know most of these as well as I. There are a lot of skill drills in the Filipino martial arts and Majapahit martial arts, in Junfan, Gung Fu, and Muay Thai. You know, shadow fighing. Train.
You got to move.
Go ahead.
Okay. You got to move your hand away.
Okay.
All right.
I'm trying to find a good place to sit my phone here. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, that works.
Okay. You know, skill drills, things like hubad, sombrada drills, limited sparring when I can. I'm 61 years old now, and I got to take care of my body, so I spar a lot less than I used to. Okay. For jujitsu, you know, repetition of movement drills.
Yeah.
Just constantly trying, because I know from experience that you never reach a point where you don't need to practice anymore. You know, it's rust never sleeps. It starts accruing right away.
Right.
I'm really fascinated by the process of, as my body ages.
Uh-huh.
And Guru Inosano talks about this a lot. As my body ages, on the one hand, if I overdo the training, I grind up the cartilage in my joints too fast. But on the other hand, if I don't train enough, my heart and lungs don't stay cardiovascularly healthy. Yeah. So I'm really fascinated by that ratio and how it's different for each person.
What's a specific for cardiovascular fitness?
Well, I've been a runner for years, but my hips are starting to go. My osteoarthritis runs in my family, and I've had to have both of my shoulders replaced in the last 3 years. Okay. And I can feel one of my hips going, so my doctor has recommended that I walk rather than run. So I take a very, very brisk 45-minute walk every morning, really pushing the pace. And it's so hard not to run, but I'm trying to keep my hips alive for as long as I can.
So that's actually a thing that that you and I had in common back in '84. We were both runners.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Strength development. What are you doing for that?
Well, again, mostly trying to save my joints. I do a lot of isometric work. I've got some gymnastic rings at my academy. I like to jump on those and just hold a position for a long time, not grind through a range of motion. I do a lot of planks. I do a lot of planks. I do some slow range of motion exercises, but again, I'm trying to save my cartilage. So, mostly just my core. To me, the core is one of the last things that needs to go. You can really work your core forever. Okay. So I do a lot of core work. I do less work on things like push-ups and squatting and some with that, but not as much as I used to.
Flexibility. Can you still do all that back bending stuff you used to do?
No. Again, I'm 61 years old now. If you give me if you give me a half hour, I can probably get about 170 degrees with my side splits, almost all the way out.
Okay.
But I used to go to 220 degrees. I used to go beyond straight.
Yeah.
So for my age, I'm great, but it's not like it used to be, for sure. Again, the cartilage in my hips is going.
Yeah.
But I'm, for percentile wise and for my age, I have to keep accepting the fact that I'm still way ahead of the curve for my age.
Okay.
I'm being dragged down the aging hole, kicking and screaming.
Oh, yeah. It's for me. I don't even tell people my age, and they go, "Well, why are you so particular about it?" I go, "Here's why. Because I think that physical, emotional, mental, psychological, chronological, and spiritual age, I think that sometimes they're not all in sync."
Yeah, I agree.
And when I look around at people like you, so in the past week I spoke with Eric Paulson, Greg Nelson, Rick Fay. You guys are like, to me, you guys are real adults, and I am still like this kid. So I don't even tell people how old I am. But the longevity thing, tell me about supplements. Is there anything like research that you've done and anything that you recommend?
I'm probably going to disappoint you because I'm really into scientific skepticism.
Okay.
That's a thing that I'm into, and people can Google that if they want to find out what it is. And much of the supplement industry is a high price scam. Mm-hmm. Most supplements you can do without, and I only learned this the hard way. And for years, I took lots of them. I spent so much money on glucosamine and chondroitin, and now studies have shown that it doesn't do anything. So basically, I go by what my doctor suggests. I supplement vitamin D, and that's about it. I don't really need to supplement much. I feel as good as I did when I supplemented before, and I save a lot of money. So that's if there was any key to longevity in my case, that's not it.
Yeah,
I hate to say it.
Yeah. The other quote from the website is, he believes that too many instructors set a poor example for their students by failing to maintain their own fitness adequately, being content to remember past accomplishments and get by on their knowledge alone. Can you remember when you first started thinking that way?
Oh, goodness. I think a lot of people who become good teachers, I'm not going to make the assumption that I'm one of those, but I think a lot of people who become good teachers have the benefit of having had bad examples of teachers as they were coming up, people they contrast themselves against. And so from very early on, and I'm not going to name any names, I don't want to play that game, but I had a few teachers here and there that just, they obviously enjoyed the role of being the sensei or the sifu so much that's really what their brain was set at. I am now at this level. I don't need to do anything to maintain it. I've achieved it.
Yeah.
And in my mind, it was obvious that they were past their prime, and not because of any kind of aging process, but because they had quit the struggle. They had, like, Sifu Inosano. One of the best examples, I guess probably the best example of positive is him, of course.
Yes.
And I remember the first time I went to Los Angeles for an instructors conference, and he offered to us, any of us that were interested, if we wanted to go the next morning, he was going to go to the Machado Academy and train. Mm-hmm. And this is when he was like just a blue belt, or he wasn't that far along. Mm-hmm. And I was a white belt, but I was really into jiu-jitsu. And I said, sure, I want to go along with you. And there were only like 5 of us that elected to go. And when he got there, he was in the front of the line as we went in, and we were signing in. And this blue belt was at the front of the school at a desk writing down names, and he didn't know who Sifu Dan was. And watching Sifu Dan very calmly explain to him how to spell his name, this guy, I'm like, this is a world famous man. You should already know how to spell his name.
Yeah.
And of course, then Sifu Dan puts on a white belt to walk into their academy. And I thought, okay, that's the way you are. That's the way you need to be. You're always a seeker. You don't need to prove to the world that you've achieved anything or that you have arrived anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so, I think really he was the first major example. when I finally saw that, I go, okay, that's something I can emulate. I learned a lot of good things from a lot of my earlier teachers, and they were not all people that were not people you could admire. But once I met that man, I remember before the CMAA, the California Martial Arts Academy seminar, I didn't know whether he was going to be a good person or not, and I was ready for him to not be a good person because I wanted the information that he had to offer so much.
Right.
And then when I met him, and he turned out to be just the sweetest man, it was such an amazing bonus.
Yeah. I never thought of that. I mean, I remember people in Barbados because I hadn't moved to Miami yet in '83. And I remember people in Barbados saying to me, well, but you don't know these people. How, you don't know what they're like, what they're going to, and I go, well, that's how I'm going to find out.
Right.
Right.
Well, I had already had another world famous martial artist who I will not name to my academy to teach a seminar the year before. And he was just the biggest asshole you've ever seen. It was horrible.
Wow.
It was, and so, but I learned a few good things. It was, there was still a learning experience.
Yes.
And so, like I said, I was ready to deal with that if I must.
Yes.
And then it was just this wonderful surprise, it was great.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm still with him just like you are 34 years later.
But there's one thing that bothers me about us and the new generation, and I probably shouldn't say this in public, but I will. Some of them copy his way of kicking without realizing that he's 82 years old.
You're right.
They don't focus on slide and kick. They don't focus on the footwork.
Right.
He walks into the kick. Yes, he's Dan Inosanto, who's 82 years old. You're still supposed to slide into the kick.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely footwork that people, especially in Jeet Kune Do, should be using.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fundamental. Bruce Lee did a wonderful job of adapting fencing footwork to kicking. It's a brilliant synthesis.
Yeah.
And that slide up step for the front leg kick is really good.
And you have that direct fencing experience, right?
I do.
Yeah. And you started teaching in '76. Was that in your own building? Was that backyard in a gym? What was '76?
Well, '76 was it began with a local community center that had a youth employment program.
Okay.
And one of the perks that they wanted to offer to these young kids to get a job was, if you get a job for the summer, we'll offer you free martial arts classes. And a buddy of mine and I had already negotiated with them to do this. So the first job was,
I'm starting to lose your head.
Okay.
I got more ceiling. Okay, that's better.
Thank you. So we basically taught this class in a community center in.
Okay, now you got to move your hand.
That's cool. We taught this class in a community center in inner city Evansville for 3 months.
Yeah.
And it was just in a gymnasium, and we kind of started learning our teaching chops that way. I had taught a few friends in college before that, just on the one-on-one basis. But then once that elapsed, because it was a finite duration, then we remodeled a garage, my buddy and I, and taught out of it for a while. And then it was a sequence of garages and commercial locations and basements for about the next 4 years until I got my first commercial location.
Yeah. See, that's what when we were back on Facebook and I did the intro and I said that I was hoping to show the incredible juxtaposition of similarity and difference, because when you were talking about the people that you trained with who had created their own methods, I had some of that in Barbados. When I started, I did the garage thing, the community center thing, all of that happened, right? And then we had that shared Muay Thai experience. But then you went to Smoky Mountain. I never went to Smoky Mountain. I started with Chai in '85. I didn't see him again until '91 when I tested for apprentice instructorship.
Oh, man. Did we tell him about the test?
Yeah.
That's a unique experience in martial arts, is taking Master Chai's apprentice instructor test.
Yeah. I mean, because here's what I was told. you got to do the Y crew, and then you got to do 2 rounds on the Thai pads. I thought, okay, because at that time I used to train 5-minute rounds. So when they said, okay, 2 minutes, two rounds on the Thai pads, I was like, no problem. Nobody told me about the attacking part.
Right. Exactly the same thing happened to me.
Really?
Yes. Well, see, the guy in my hometown, a former student of mine, was a heavyweight, and he got hooked up with Ajahn Chai more intimately and earlier than I did because he only focused on Muay Thai.
Yeah.
And then after about 6 months, he told me, you should go take the test too. And I said, okay. And I asked him to describe it for me, and he pretty much said what you said. But the thing is, I seriously doubt at the seminar he was at there was anyone there that could really push him. He already had like a belt, a kickboxing belt for North America. He was an amazing fighter.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't have been that difficult for him. But he said, oh yeah, they'll kick at your legs a little bit. You can handle it. And the seminar I went to, I don't know if you know Rob Kelly.
Yes.
Well, Rob Kelly, I did my first round, and I did 88 kicks. I had no one to train me for this, so no one told me you need to pace yourself and just do the 60 kicks.
Right.
So I just kept kicking.
Yeah.
And I did 88 kicks the first round, and then I went and I sat down on my little stool, and my guys are working on me, and I looked over at Ajahn Chai, and they had a big pool of people. This was at the Atlanta seminar. They had a huge pool of instructors to draw from.
Right.
And they had a guy come up, and he's standing there and he's waiting, and Ajahn Chai looks at him and shook his head and goes, no. And he reaches over, he points over, he goes, Rob. And Rob Kelly comes up, and Ajahn Chai is pointing at me, and Rob is looking at me, and he's whispering in Rob's ear, and Rob's nodding his head and looking at me like something he's going to eat.
Oh God.
And he proceeded to light into me in that second round, and it was vicious. And I asked Ajahn Chai years later, I said, did I make you angry? Did I piss you off? You know, because you really seemed to sick him on me. He goes, no, I just wanted to show you that you were stupid in your first round when you did 88 kicks. He didn't quite say stupid, but basically that's what I got from it, you know.
Yeah.
He said I needed to have better strategy, but I didn't have anyone to train me. You know, I was just doing it on my own. No one had told me, you know, you're better off pacing yourself and only doing 60 kicks and just foot J. I thought I was supposed to just keep kicking the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at one point, Rob looks at me and he goes, kick, because he had been attacking so much that I was just pulling into a ball and defending.
Who fed you your first round? Do you remember?
It was Floyd Jackson.
Oh my God.
I did fine that round. I did fine. Maybe Ajahn Chai didn't tell him to go hard or something. He's a big guy and a really very competent martial artist.
Yeah.
And I love Floyd. He's a great guy. And he went pretty hard. But you know, I was more tired for the second round, and Ajahn Chai obviously gave Rob instructions to go at it.
Yeah. What year?
Man,
What year was this?
80. No. Excuse me. That was 91.
Okay. You're my man. Same year as me.
Erie do you have the other half of this medallion?
So back then, nobody wore the headgear and the shin pads.
Right.
And you know, and you wore bag gloves, not boxing gloves.
Yeah, I was kicked with a bare shin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Including in the head. I remember Rob kicking me in the head, and I remember my head going like this and coming back, and I remember thinking, I'm so glad that wasn't in the leg again.
Okay, now who was the first person that you fed for a Thai test?
The same day that I passed my Thai test.
Uh-huh.
I don't know the guy's name, but I turned around and held for someone that same day.
No.
Because there was I actually the day that Rob Kelly held for me, he went at me so intensely that I ended up failing. I only got 57 kicks.
Oh.
And when the person on the corner threw in the bean bag and said, "Time," and I was simultaneously exhausted and kind of mad because I thought I'd been picked on a little bit.
Yeah.
Because everybody who went before me passed fairly easily, and I watched them and I go, I got this.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of felt like I was made an example of, and I've talked with Ajahn Chai about this,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't. He just he saw some potential there, and he was holding me to a higher standard.
Exactly.
And I appreciate it very much. At the time, I did not appreciate it. I walked out I didn't make a jerk of myself, but I walked out and I was sitting angry on this stone bench.
Yeah.
And Ajahn Chai walks out. He sits down next to me and he says, "I suppose you're pretty pissed off at me right now, sir." And I said, "Well, sir, I'd just rather not speak about it right now."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Okay." He goes, you got 57 kick. You needed 60. He goes, "You deserve to pass. But if I let you pass with 57 kick, I got to let the next guy pass with 56 kick. I have to draw a line somewhere."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "I understand." He goes, "Come back to a seminar in Charlotte, North Carolina in 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
You'll only have to do 1 round."
Ah.
And so that day I trained and I went back. I agreed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I finished that. I did the 1 round, and Dickie Harrell held for that. Right? And so that was, that was fairly intense. Only doing 1 round was still fairly intense because I was so juiced up. I was determined I was going to do it.
Right.
And I went at it pretty hard, right?
Yeah.
And so then Ajahn Chai had already told me they only had Dick Harrell and Rob Kelly were the only instructors there. Well, this was Rob Kelly's student that was going to test after me. Rob couldn't hold for his own student.
Right.
And Dick Harrell had just held for me. So Ajahn Chai goes, "You have to hold for him." And I was so loopy and goofy and happy I'd passed the test. I go, "Okay." And they strapped on the belly pad, and I put on the tie pads. And this guy did not have the best test I've ever seen because, I was not that. I tried to be focused. At one point, he got me in a front headlock and got off about 10 knees. And Ajahn Chai going, "Oh, you having a problem, sir?" And he was laughing, So I got the guy off of me and continued. And that was the first person. But I've held for lots of tests since then.
Okay. Well, just so you know, right, he spoke quite highly of you last weekend here in Miami. He really,
Well, that was and he'll be at my academy next weekend.
right. Yeah, that's what he told me.
Yeah, Ajahn Chai is like my big brother or my father. I was terrified of him for the first few years I brought him to town, but now it's like picking my brother up at the airport.
When can you remember when you first saw him smile? I ask people that all the time.
That's a great question. I tell you what, I had a different perspective because at the Smoky Mountains camp, he was living there.
Mm-hmm.
So, you got to see him in his downtime.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a bunch of children that lived at the house where the camp was. And he got in a fireworks fight with these children on 4th of July night. And I jumped in and joined them. And he was laughing and smiling and having a great time just shooting bottle rockets at these kids. Yeah. And just having an interaction with them. So I actually saw him smile one of the first days that I was there. But at seminars in those days, it was rare to see.
Yeah.
I remember the first day I met him, remember Graciela Casillas?
Uh-huh. Yep.
She was teaching the beginners at his part of the camp. So if you went in and you were just doing Muay Thai, he had Rick Fay and Greg Nelson and Terry Gibson down in the middle of a field, all the advanced guys working with them. Yep. And Graciela Casillas got all the scrubs, all of us beginners, up on this concrete patio and was working with us. And at one point, she sees this guy go over and grab a bottle of water and start to take a drink. And she goes, "Don't let Ajahn Chai see you drinking that water." And she was terrified because she could see him looking up at her every once in a while, making sure that she was working as hard. Mm-hmm. So definitely I remember what you're referring to. In those days, he didn't smile much when he was teaching.
Yeah. So you started teaching in 76 and you opened Rising Phoenix in 1980.
Yes.
What's the story behind the name Rising Phoenix?
That's a good question. In my hometown, there were a few kung fu schools that opened up through the years. Mm-hmm. In those days, and every one of them was some kind of dragon. Mm-hmm. It was the white dragon, the black dragon, the ultimate dragon. and so on. And I was determined I was not going to call it something dragon.
Yeah.
And then one day I was thinking about other, mythical creatures, and I knew that the phoenix was common to more than one culture.
Yeah.
The Native Americans called it the firebird, but there was a firebird in a lot of cultures. And I was really taken by the concept of the cycle of death and rebirth. And I used to, on my rank certificates that I would award, I had a little poem or saying that I wrote. I probably will get it a little wrong, but it went something like, just as the phoenix of legend arises from its own funeral pyre, from the ashes of its funeral pyre reborn, so do we arise above our fears and weaknesses and become what we truly are. And it partly stemmed from, anybody who's an athlete, a martial artist, a musician, any kind of an artist or a person who strives to become better at something,
Mm-hmm.
they go through periods where they're in a slump.
Yeah.
Like a little period of miniature death.
Yeah.
And if you don't quit, which many people do, if some catalyst happens and you kind of push through the slump and get back going again, it's like being reborn.
Yeah.
And it struck me that we all go through this cycle of death and rebirth, of down periods and up periods. And frequently when we hit, it's almost like being bipolar in a way. When we hit the up period, I always felt like, wow, I'm better than I've ever been. And I just came out of this slump.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where rising came from. It was like an upward spiral,
Okay.
So that's where the term rising phoenix came from.
Have you always been this mental?
I know. Yeah. I was quite the nerd in school, and if you mean as the British mean, like crazy at that too.
No, not at all. No, I was born British, but no, I don't often use their vernacular.
I noticed you said garage a while ago.
Yeah, yeah. People get on me because I say schedule. So
I love it. I love it when Americans say, "Hey, I like your British accent," and because I'll hear that, and the British person will say, "Hey, I don't have an accent. I speak English.
Yeah.
You Americans have an accent."
Yeah. Talking about schedule, we couldn't start at 3 p.m. because of your daily schedule. So give me an idea of what your daily schedule is like.
Okay. I own my academy and run it. But
so RP is a full-time gig.
Not quite full-time in this sense. It's a small business. I'm not the greatest businessman in the world. I don't make a ton of money. So I have trouble affording health insurance. Mm-hmm. So I drive a school bus, and it's a part-time job that offers full-time benefits.
Okay.
And so my morning starts by getting up early,
mm-hmm.
drinking a glass of tea, getting on my bus and doing the morning run,
mm-hmm.
getting home, getting off the bus, eating breakfast, doing a little bit of paperwork, going to my academy and teaching morning classes at 11. I teach till 12:30, come home, eat lunch, get on the bus, drive the afternoon run, get off the bus, which is what I did before you and I began today.
Okay.
And then I would go back to the academy in the evening and teach an evening group of classes. Then I get home just in time to eat supper, go to bed, and start the process over again.
Okay. All right. So that's pretty much then also the weekly schedule up until Saturday and Sunday. So
right.
what happens on Saturday?
I teach from 1 o'clock till 3 o'clock, and then the evening is with my grandchildren and my wife.
Okay.
And then Sundays I record my podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes if I have a rank test to conduct at my academy, that's the days we usually go do that. But otherwise I'm not at the academy on Sundays.
Okay. All right. On the website, in the gallery section, there's a picture of you kneeling in your jujitsu gi, in the blue. Actually, I used it. I don't know if you saw the ad, the postcard that I put up.
I did look at it.
Okay. Do you know the photograph I'm talking about?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's you kneeling in your blue jujitsu gi. I'm going to try to pull it up here. And you're looking to your left. See, I wish I had a way of showing it to you so you would know exactly.
I'm going to walk over to my desktop computer
Okay.
and see if I can find. I've got your Facebook page up.
Okay. Yeah. Scroll down to the ad. It's the.
I'm going to go to, I think it's, if I go to my page, it's going to be there.
Okay. Oh no, it's not in your blue gi. It's in an all black gi with blue mats behind you.
Yes, yes. I remember that day very well.
Okay, all right. So here's my question. I find that to be an absolutely striking photograph because of the look on your face. Can you remember what you were looking at?
Well, that's the day I was awarded my black belt.
Aha.
And my teacher, Marcelo Monteiro, if I recall correctly, is speaking.
Okay.
And I'm watching and listening to him speak.
Okay. So can you remember what you were thinking?
Well, I was in a mental roil. You know, my first grandchild had been born that week. I got my black belt in jiu-jitsu, which took the better part of 2 decades to get to from beginning to end.
Yeah.
Not that it's an end.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there were a lot of things going through my mind. I couldn't pinpoint what was happening at the moment of that photograph.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you something right now. Here's the note I made about it. To me, it shows peacefulness, contemplativeness, thoughtfulness, but for some reason, I feel like that all came at great personal expense to you. And then my question was, do you have any idea why I got that vibe from that photograph?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Maybe I look like that all the time. I don't know. Maybe that's my respectful look while I'm sitting and listening to my instructor. But there were so many things going through my mind at that moment.
Yeah, it's a great photograph. I got to tell you, I saw it and I thought I have to use that one on the ad for sure.
Yeah, that photo has always struck me as well. I think it's I don't know that I photograph well, and that's one of a whole bunch of them that were taken that day at the seminar, and I pulled that one out and put it up among the photographs because something about it struck me, but I couldn't put my finger on it.
Okay. So I want to jump back to episode number 1 of how long will it take? Because the second part of that is how long will it take me to get in the cage, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've been asked that too by prospective clients.
Yeah. So have you ever actually attended a Tough Man contest?
Very much so, yes.
Really?
Yeah, I've never participated, but the guy who taught me how to box, Kevin, he's probably watching and listening right now. Hi, Kevin. I love you. He had just gotten out of the Army. He was in the 82nd Airborne, and he had a brand new baby. He and his wife weren't doing that well financially, and the Owensboro is a town in Kentucky about 45 minutes from my hometown. And this was back when Tough Man contests were just starting. They were the new thing. Okay. You know, amateur boxing from untrained people basically is what it was, right?
Yeah.
Well, Kevin had a ridiculous number of fights, but he needed the money. The prize money was $1,000. So he fibbed on his entry application to get in, put a different name down, and they didn't even have weight divisions. They had it was only whatever weight you wanted to be. He weighed 162 pounds, and most of the guys he fought were 250, 300 pounds.
Wow!
And he preferred it that way because he told me, he goes, heavyweights are easier to knock out because they're slower.
Right.
And he and I were an interesting contrast to each other because I was an elusive, evasive fighter, and Kevin was very much like a Marvin Hagler type of fighter.
Okay.
Hard to really hurt,
Yeah.
but you always knew where he was.
Yeah.
You know, he was right. It was never hard to find him, but it was hard to hit him.
Mhm.
But Kevin fought, and he knocked out all of his competitors in the first round. And I saw that, and I went back a few years later when one of my students wanted to participate in that, and I think I can't remember whether I worked Kevin's corner. I know his brother was there, and he worked his corner. I may have helped with that, and in my student, I worked his corner as well.
Okay.
But I developed a strong distaste for the rule set of it, and also, to be honest, most of the crowd, you know, because it struck me that the more technique they saw, the less they liked it.
Yeah.
You know, and it was, I don't know, it's almost like a comment, like it struck me as being like bread and circuses, you know, ancient Rome and the gladiators. They would just as soon see an execution in ancient Rome as they would see two gladiators fight each other.
Apply the idea of false dichotomy to life.
Wow. Okay. Well, okay. That's a good challenge. I like that. One of the things on my podcast that I talk about a lot is that humans tend to engage in polar thinking, bipolar thinking that a scenario either has two choices. It's either this or it's that. When in reality, the universe is much more complex and nuanced and subtle than that. So in general, it's almost always the case that the situation is a spectrum with here's one end and here's the other end, and we're trying to find Goldilocks in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think humans are prone to engaging in false dichotomies all the time. And that's a false, you know, it's also called, false dichotomy is also referred to as a false choice.
Yeah.
And the answer to the false dichotomy is there's always a third way. You know, like the old cliche of you're either with me or against me.
Right.
Can't I be just in between and not be either one?
Yeah. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Apply the idea of false dichotomy to martial arts in general and Jeet Kune Do in specific.
Okay. Great example in the martial arts is the old false dichotomy of, do you practice a hard style or a soft style? You know, and it always struck me that it's like, okay, description of a hard style from a hard stylist, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we stress fitness, we stress power, we stress intensity, and discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so get a description of a soft style from a soft stylist. Oh, we stress fluidity, economy of motion, precise timing, being in the right place at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I like the sound of both of those. Yeah. Why do I have to pick one?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's one example. And then to me, Jeet Kune Do is a perfect illustration of applying the scientific method to limited thinking like that. You know, the idea that, to me, the whole idea of martial arts styles is really, style is this word that has become almost like has religious significance when it's really just the program that some dude wrote. Mm-hmm. You know, mm-hmm. just like the program that a football coach uses.
Yeah.
You know, it's great, but it's not sacred. You know, and the person who I'm fairly convinced that if you could go back in time and talk to the founders of a lot of the systems, almost all of them would not be pleased with how their system was ossified, calcified, and carved into stone and never changed again after that.
Interesting.
You know, I think it's almost always the followers that do that because, oh, well, you think you know as much as the founder does, and that gets to the whole, and another element that gets to the whole Jeet Kune Do concepts versus, you know, original JKD.
Yeah.
You know, people saying, oh, so you think you know as much as Bruce Lee? Well, of course not. No one knows as much as anyone else. You know, everyone's unique.
Yeah.
So, but I do think that had Bruce Lee lived, that's going to be a future podcast. What if Bruce Lee had lived? I think that had Bruce Lee lived, it should be obvious to anyone that Jeet Kune Do would look nothing now like what it once did. I mean, it's been 40 years.
Yeah.
and he would only be in his 80s like Guru Dan, right? So who knows what would have happened to it between then and now.
Right. What do you do anything to generate ideas for topics for the podcast, or do they just come to you?
Yeah, it's more of the latter. I always have my iPod with me.
Uh-huh.
And, something comes to me, I whip out my iPod, go to my notes section, and, just type down the idea. One of my favorite, when I started doing the podcast, I realized the next time I went to a good seminar, which is a Dan Inosanto seminar, not only was I taking notes on really cool stuff, he would say something and it would give me the idea for a podcast.
Yes.
And I would write that in the margin in my notes, podcast idea, : and there it is. And I've probably gotten 20 ideas, just from listening to him speak.
I do the same thing.
There you go. There you go. Great minds think. Do you have the other half of this medallion?
Hey, is that medallion a Star Trek or a Star Wars medallion?
It's a Star Trek medallion, definitely.
Okay. All right. So, all right, let's talk nerd.
Okay, cool.
Because we did a little birthday celebration on Tuesday night after my class, right? And we got into a discussion of Doctor Who. And one of the guys goes, I had no idea Sifu Dwight was such a nerd.
That's where we are different. All of my students know what a nerd I am.
Oh, okay. Right. So are you a Doctor Who fan?
I never got into it. I didn't. It really isn't for like a choice so much. It just never got into it. But that's definitely one of those things in my queue of things to get into in the future.
Okay.
I know what a TARDIS is, and I know who the Time Lords were.
Okay. All right. What about nerd TV show? Well, this is kind of a nerd show. Orphan Black. Did you ever hear of that?
No, I've never heard of that.
No. Okay. All right. You should take a look at that. You might find that one interesting. Do you get your nerdiness from your mom or your dad?
You know what? Neither, really.
I
shouldn't say it that way. My father left when I was 4 years old.
Okay.
So I don't have a basis for comparison. I've been told that he was very intelligent.
Okay.
My mother was smart, but she was very different than he was. She wasn't someone who gave me an example of being bookish or anything like that. She was just a hardworking single mom.
Mm-hmm.
So that just kind of grew on its own. I think I might be somewhere on the spectrum, mildly, maybe Asperger's syndrome or something. I was obsessed when I was, like, for example, when I was a little boy, I was obsessed with geography.
Okay.
And I put together a map collection. We were very poor. We lived 7 of us in a mobile home. Mm-hmm. But, we would have magazines in the house. And before my mom would throw a magazine away, I would go through every page and find any map. And then I would tape it onto a piece of paper and put it in a folder. And I had a folder for Africa, a folder for North America, a folder for South America. And I would sit and stare at these maps all day long and memorize the capitals of every country. And no one told me to do this. This was something that just grew out of my own fascination. And I did the same thing with lots of different things. So I think I was just born that way.
How did you do in school? Was that
very well, straight A's.
Okay. And then you went on to college and studied what?
Okay, college is an interesting story. I got a full scholarship, and I went to Indiana University, double majored in history and anthropology.
See, I knew history played a part there. When I hear you talk about the Filipino-American War, right?
That's going to be a future podcast, by the way.
Okay. Hey, you want to hear my claim to fame?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm a Filipino martial arts instructor under Dan Inosanto. And I'm named after Dwight D. Eisenhower and Douglas MacArthur.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Here's a cool nerdy fact about Dwight Eisenhower.
Okay.
You know who Jim Thorpe was?
The boxer.
No, Jim Thorpe was a Native American athlete.
Okay.
And he won gold medals at Olympics many times, had them stripped away because to support his poor family back in Oklahoma, he played some semi-professional baseball.
Okay.
and was stripped of his medals. And he's a very famous American hero. He had to go to this college called Carlisle College that was segregated. It was only for Native Americans, where they were the people who ran the college would try to strip them of their Native American identity and force them to only speak English. But they kind of were able to sort of still keep some of their culture and some of their identity at the school. And one of the things that they did was they had a great football team. And in the Carlisle versus West Point football game, Jim Thorpe tackled Dwight Eisenhower, the Golden Boy running back for the Army, and broke his leg. Another cool story about Jim Thorpe was in the 1912 Olympics. We're in Oslo, Norway. And Jim Thorpe was just a dude. You know, he grew up really poor. There were no nobility around for him to learn about titles and things like that. Yeah. And the King of Norway.
You got a light over your right shoulder that's coming in. Yeah, okay, better.
The King of Norway wanted to offer him a special award in addition to all the gold medals he had won for how amazing and inspiring and entertaining he had been at the games. And he had this gold Viking ship. It was obviously very valuable. And he presented it to Jim Thorpe, and Jim Thorpe goes, "Wow, thanks, King." I love that story. That's so quintessentially American, you know?
Yeah. Did you ever hear a story about Jefferson's quip about speak softly and carry a big stick? About that?
Oh, you mean Roosevelt?
Roosevelt. I'm sorry. That might have something to do with Filipino stick fighting.
Yeah, Guru Onosano told us that's a traditional Filipino martial arts expression.
Yeah,
and that he's pretty sure that it was General Leonard Wood that who had
you see connections?
Yeah. See, General Leonard Wood had been a commander of American troops in the Philippines, and he suspects that connection came because Leonard Wood and Teddy Roosevelt apparently were quite close with one another.
Yeah.
And he's pretty sure that Teddy Roosevelt took a few Filipino martial arts classes at the White House, and that may well be where he picked it up. It's a tenuous connection; we can't be sure.
Yeah,
you know, but he did do boxing, he did wrestling, he did jujitsu at the White House. Yeah. A lot of people don't know that there was an early fad of jujitsu in both Great Britain and in North America around the turn of the century, like the 1900 to like 1910 era.
Yeah.
I actually did a podcast about Bartitsu.
Right. I was going to ask you if it was that one.
Yeah, I called it Battling Bartitsu Babes.
Yeah.
Because the women's suffrage movement was going on in England at the time. And one of Barton Wright, the founder of Bartitsu, one of his top students was a 4'11" little woman, and she trained the bodyguards for the leader of the women's suffrage movement because the police were beating up these women that were protesting and demonstrating to try to get the vote. And she had a group of bodyguards called the Amazons that she trained in jujitsu, in Bartitsu, to guard this woman like in 1910.
Oh my God.
Yeah. They concealed clubs under their skirts, and when the police would beat them, they would hit them. They didn't want to like leave scars on the women, so they would beat them with billy clubs on the body. So the women took to wearing corrugated cardboard around their middle as armor to fight the police.
See, this is why, right? This is why I'm so glad I started doing the Jeet Kune Do dialogues, because we got such smart people in the JKD world. And
I've met a lot of them. There's a lot of smart guys. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, okay. So I want to start to wrap this up. First book you ever read. Can you remember?
Man, I started reading books when I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
It would be hard to say. I will tell you that my mom was married to this loser that kept getting us kicked out of everywhere we lived. So I would move. I went to 12 different elementary schools. And one of the first things I would do every time we moved is I would go to the school library and check out every book on Greek mythology that I could find. I was really into that when I was a little boy.
Okay.
So it was probably a Greek mythology book.
Okay. Most recent book that you've read?
The new autobiography, or the new biography of Bruce Lee.
Oh, the Matthew Pauly's book?
Yes, it's
Bruce Lee.
really good.
Yeah, I just finished it too.
I was impressed with that. Wasn't it astonishing, the genealogy at the beginning?
Yes, it's
I
worth
mean,
it.
I had no idea. He was, 3/8 European. Not that it makes a difference in any other sense. I'm fascinated by the history, that it was a closeted Jewish man that was basically a slave trader.
Yeah.
Who was his great grandfather.
Yeah.
That's just, you can't write that. That's an amazing story.
Yes.
And then his grandmother was a concubine. I mean, just crazy stuff.
Yeah. So from what you've revealed of yourself over the past few minutes, you must have had, and you alluded to it earlier, but I just realized it, with your knowledge and interest in geography and history and what have you, you must relish, forget enjoy, you must relish your time with Dan Inosanto.
Oh, very much. I remember coming home from a seminar, and like you, I always try to take a student or 2 or 3 or 5 with me and try to talk. It's worth the money. You'll never forget it.
Yeah.
So I went with one student to a Dan Inosanto seminar. I don't remember where it was. It may have been in Indianapolis. And we're driving home, and I'm like, man, wasn't that a great seminar? And my student goes, well, the martial arts part was awesome, but I wish he wouldn't talk about the history all the time. I know, that was exactly the sound I made. I said, are you kidding? That's one of the best parts of the seminar.
Yeah.
And I love it. And I love the fact that he's tied into, because one of my favorite expressions is,
you gotta move your hand.
Yes, one of my favorite expressions is, history is written by the victors.
Uh-huh.
And so Guru Inosanto's tied in with stuff that his dad taught him.
Yes.
That was decidedly not written by the victors.
Okay,
which is
listen,
fascinating.
I gotta tell you, 2 or 3 degrees of Dan Inosanto, parts 1 through 4. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Oh my gosh. I had such a good time researching you, Jeff. I really did.
Thank you very much.
I really did. It was, because, when I started the podcast about a year ago, I did a kind of not a very good, but a rebuttal of a guy named Steven Crowder, who had done a debunking of Bruce Lee, right? And in the comments, I had never heard the term before, but somebody accused me of being a Bruce Lee fanboy, right?
I'll take that.
Okay. But that's why I said at the beginning of our time together that I became such a fanboy of yours, just
thank you very much.
listening to to your podcast. So just a couple more questions. In what ways? Now I'm thinking. Okay, I'm thinking differently from when I wrote this. But anyhow, in what ways does your brain get in your way?
That's a great question. Sometimes. Well, okay. Probably the best way to talk about it is to talk about slow thinking and fast thinking.
Okay.
And this is something I think I do much better now than I used to, because I intellectually grasp this. I understand this better than I used to. And that is, there are 2 major modes of thinking. There is instinctive, reflexive thinking that we need. We need if we're in a fight. You don't want to spend 5 minutes rationally deciding what technique you're going to use next against the opponent. You don't have time. You have to have, ideally, you've done some training, and you've got to be able to think reflexively. Or if you're in traffic, and you must make a quick decision, you can't take a lot of time and rationally think things out. And so a lot of people like to say, I like to go with my gut, and that's fast thinking. But there are times when an important decision is happening that you don't want to engage in fast thinking. When you're trying to think about where you're going to spend your money to go to college, or do you want to bring a child into the world? Are you going to ask her to marry you? Yeah. Really important decisions, you need to slow down and think critically and rationally. And a lot of people don't understand that you use different parts of your brain for each of those, and they're each very important functions. But there are a lot of people that only do one or only do the other. And I think that Your brain can get in your way when you when you choose not to be in the moment and just react in self-defense or in sparring, right? And you overthink things. That's thinking too critically when you need to be thinking reactively, and vice versa. People that go with their first impulse in a life-changing decision when they really should spend some time thinking about it.
Yeah.
Does that address your question?
Yeah. Hey, look, here's the deal. I ask the questions. I ask the questions. You give the answers. I'm happy.
Okay, cool.
And I feel a little bit smarter. Have you ever been accused of being too serious all the time?
No, not too much, because I don't express this as much in the podcast as I do at my academy. I'm a goof, man. I'm a joker, and I tease my students relentlessly.
Yeah.
So I try to be have a little more decorum in the podcast. I do a one little series on there called Weird Tales of the Rising Phoenix Martial Arts Academy, where I discuss
those. Yeah.
range. Okay, if those are not serious at all, those are comedy. Those are attempts at comedy. And there are 5 of them on there. You might find them interesting to listen to at least once. But I don't get accused of that too much most of the time. Now, sometimes if I'm in a certain mode, like driving my school bus, the kids on my school bus used to accuse me of being too serious, because I spent the first 2 years trying to be the cool school bus driver, and I found out they were just taking advantage of me.
Yeah.
And I decided they've either got to respect me, or I'm going to be I've got to keep them safe.
Right.
And with this particular group of kids, I tried to be their buddy, and it didn't work. So a lot of them didn't see me smile for 1 or 2 years, because I was so focused on getting them to school alive and getting them home alive. And it was so hard to tell them on occasion, you don't know what a joker I am. But if I break that barrier, the bad kids on the bus are going to take advantage of me.
Right.
So anyways, that's the only time was the kids on my bus. One time I smiled, and one of the girls on the bus goes, "You just smiled. I've never seen you smile before." and I was very tempted to say, "Come train at my martial arts academy. You'll see me smile every day."
Yeah. Okay. Recommendations of JKD people that I should ask to appear on the program with me.
That's a great question. There's a gentleman named Jason Hawkins, who teaches in Paducah, Kentucky. Okay. There's a guy named Jason Winkle, who if I'm not mistaken, he's the CEO of the YMCA in Bloomington, Indiana now. Okay. But he had a sweet gig for a while teaching martial arts at West Point. Okay. And these are both guys that used to bring me in and have me teach seminars at their academy, but I admire them too. They're very interesting guys. Okay. There's a couple of young men named Rob Lee and Eric Charles that Guru Dan calls the whiz kids. They're probably in their early 30s now, but they used to come take my seminars when they were 14, 13, and then they would go. I talked them into going to Guru Dan's seminars, and these two kids have grown up to be really whip smart, smarter than me, and really good teachers, and very, very eloquent, and do a great job of expressing themselves. I think Eric Charles lives in Washington, D.C., is in foreign relations now. Okay. And Rob Lee is a therapist. I think he's working towards being a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Okay. These are really smart people. They'd be great to. I think Rob might be training under Kevin Seaman now. Okay. All right. Now, are you in touch, friends with, close to Rick Fay? I live as far away from Rick Fay as I do from you. Okay. I'm in southern Indiana, and it's about a 14 to 16 hour drive up to Minnesota from here. Okay. But I have the only time I can remember ever actually meeting him was at the 86 camp where I met Master Chai in North Carolina. So we've passed each other's like ships in the night for decades and never actually hooked up.
Okay. I was hoping that you were, because here's what happened when I did a couple of weeks ago. I did the show with him, and we had the same Facebook difficulties. So then we repaired to Zoom, like you and I are on now, and I forgot to push the button, the record button.
Oh wow!
Right. But here's what I don't have a record of. Rick talking about Kali and neuroplasticity.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I wanted to finish this up with your thoughts on that, or research or information or what have you.
Well, now my understanding of neuroplasticity, and I may have this wrong, is the ability of the brain when injured to rewire itself. For example, there's a cliche that if you go blind, your other senses grow stronger to compensate.
Mm-hmm.
That's not actually quite true.
Mm-hmm.
What the science says is that the brain power that was used to process vision now doesn't have a job, doesn't have anything to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it begins to find new things to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my understanding of neuroplasticity. But did Rick have a different definition of it in that sense?
Yeah. See, so here's what I recollect from what he talked about. So he has a stepson who has a brain disorder, right? And so apparently they were at a therapy session. I hope I'm getting this story right. I want to do it justice. And the therapist says, well, okay, what he needs is something where he'll move his arms like this.
Oh, let's see, Hubud maybe.
Right? Now it gets better. And then the therapist says, and what would be even better is if when his right hand is forward, he could put his left foot forward.
That's
right? Awesome. And I think I got this right. Rick looks at his wife and he says, honey, I got this.
What's the old expression? Hold my beer. That's awesome.
Isn't it?
Yeah, that's great. You know, and I have a lot of success with folks that have neurological problems, if maybe nothing more than just not very coordinated all the way to having serious problems.
Yeah.
Really pick up on a lot of the flow drills from Filipino martial arts nicely.
Yeah. All right. So listen, I appreciate your spending some time with me on a Friday evening. There's so much more that we have to talk about, right? But I don't want to take up your entire evening. So
well, message me anytime.
Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure.
Well, you've been a kind and a generous host. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, sir. So everybody should check you out at rpmartialarts.com. And that's where they'll find the Brain podcast. That doesn't have a separate website, correct?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have a separate podcast, but it is available on most aggregators. And you can find the 50 most recent episodes on Stitcher or iTunes, but you can find all 176 of them at this point on my website.
All right. Okay. Jeff Westfall, thanks so much. I'll see you again.
My pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you, Dwight.
All righty.
Forward. I know of no one who has ever heard of this gang fight against sailors story. Early in the film, the silly demon theme is introduced. Bruce's father, as depicted in the film, warns him of a demon that took, he says, his older brother as a child, and that now awaits him. Now, mind you, I am not speaking of a figurative demon, as we mean when we say he is outrageously choreographed and depicted. And again, I know of no reference to this story anywhere in his life. At one point in the scene, the Bruce Lee character is actually standing balanced on an I-beam far above the ground, while cleaver-wielding Chinese cooks approach him from either side. Don't you think we would have heard about this kind of fight at
After defeating this gang of thugs, in some cases using techniques that could easily have crippled them,
Two of them pick themselves up and cheerfully approach Bruce outside in the parking lot, where they ask him to teach them the martial arts. I don't know about any of you other martial arts instructors out there, but I can't tell you how many times I myself have picked up students from my academy in the same way. Not long after this, Mr. Lee opens a... although in the film his opponent is given a different name. Accounts vary as to what actually happened during this fight. What is known is that for one reason or another, Bruce Lee was challenged to a match by a representative of the traditional Chinese martial arts community. Some accounts, and this film, be of his finished book, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do, from the publisher. There's only one problem. Bruce Lee never completed his work. He never submitted a manuscript to a publisher. And of course, he never received a copy of it during his life. I can well remember being on...
All right, clean this up. One and two. Why is this fussing and fighting? I wanna know.